Welcome to The Explainer. You know, if you've ever watched a high-stakes football or basketball game, you know that all that absolute chaos on the field is actually governed by a really strict intentional rulebook. Well, the US government operates exactly the same way. Today, we're going to break down the architecture of American power. But we're not doing a dry political science lesson. No way. We're looking at it as the ultimate competitive sport. Let's crack open the rulebook and see exactly how this game is played.
So, who really controls the United States? It's a massive question, right? When most fans tune into this particular game, they immediately focus on the star player, the president. The cameras follow them, the commentary is basically all about them, and it's incredibly easy to just assume that this one individual is running the whole show and calling all the shots. But is that actually how the game is designed?
Here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with the pregame myth, then look at the ultimate rulebook, the three key positions, the referees, rival teams, and gridlock, and finally wrap up with balance or chaos. Let's kick off with part one, the pregame myth, the illusion of the star player. Before we can really understand the playbook here, we have to clear up the biggest misconception fans bring to the stadium. There's this pervasive myth that one person controls everything. But the absolute fact of the matter, this system is meticulously designed so that no single person has all the power. The architects of this government were actually terrified of a single player taking over the league, essentially. So they rigged the rules from day one to make absolute control practically impossible. Which brings us to part two, the ultimate rulebook, separation of powers. This is the foundational rule of the sport that keeps everything fair. The US runs on a system called the separation of powers. On the field, this literally means power is divided up into three distinct parts, and each part actively checks the others. Think of it like a game where you've got three different units out on the turf at the exact same time, and they are constantly watching and blocking each other to make sure nobody gets an unfair advantage. Honestly, no single branch can just go unchecked. Moving right along to part three, the three key positions, offense and defense. Let's look at the actual roster. First up, we've got the executive branch, starring, of course, the president. You can really think of the president as the team captain playing on offense. They lead the country, they make the major decisions, and they represent the whole franchise to the rest of the world. They're leading the charge, trying to execute these massive plays. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. They can't just run the ball down the field without dealing with the defense. And that defense, that's the legislative branch, better known as Congress. Made up of the Senate and the House of Representatives, their main job in this game is to actually create and pass the laws. They are the massive blockers on the field. The president might want to run a really specific, flashy play, but Congress is the one actually holding the playbook. So, let's walk through a literal play here. Step 1, the president makes a plan. They call an offensive play. Step 2, Congress does not agree, so the defense holds the line. And step 3, the president's plans stop right there. Boom, the tackle is made. If Congress refuses to pass the law, the agenda's just completely halted. And you know what? The defense just did its job perfectly according to the rule book. That brings us to part 4, the referees, the judicial branch. We've talked about the offense and the defense, but what about the third part of our divided power? These are the officials who don't actually touch the ball themselves, but they are scrutinizing every single movement in the game. These referees make up the Supreme Court, the highest court in the country. They're up in the booth, watching the plays unfold, deciding whether laws actually follow the Constitution, which is our master rulebook. If a law gets passed, but the Supreme Court throws a flag because it violates the Constitution, they literally cancel the play. They review the game to make sure everyone is playing fair. On to part 5, rival teams and gridlock, competing for power. Now this is where the game gets incredibly interesting. We know the positions and the rules, but to truly get why this game is so intense, you got to look at the two competing franchises. On the left side, you have the Democrats. On the right side, the Republicans. It is absolutely vital to understand that they are just two rival teams competing for power, and they have completely different playbooks on how the country should be run. So what happens when players from these two rival teams are forced to play on the exact same field at the exact same time? Well, we get what's called a divided government. This happens when different parties control different parts of the government. Just imagine a scenario where the team captain, the president, is from one franchise, but the defensive line, Congress, is completely controlled by the rival franchise. When you have that kind of divided control,
The result is that the game intentionally grinds to a halt. First, the debates grow, as players clash over literally every inch of turf. Then, decisions slow way down. Ultimately, politics becomes this brutal goal line standoff where nothing moves easily. We call it gridlock. And yeah, it can be incredibly frustrating to watch as a fan, but according to the rulebook, this is just the defense doing exactly what it was designed to do, making sure power doesn't just rush forward unchecked. And finally, part 6, balance or chaos, the final whistle. It's time to review everything we've seen on the field today and answer that massive question we asked right at the very beginning. Who really controls America? Well, it's not just the president, it's not just Congress, and it's sure not the courts alone. No single position, no matter how famous or powerful the player seems, gets to just dictate the outcome. They all need each other to move the ball, and crucially, they all have the power to stop each other right in their tracks.
And that brings us to our final takeaway today. The real power is in the system itself, a system designed to balance power, but sometimes create chaos. It's a brilliant, messy, highly competitive game. So, the next time you see Washington completely gridlocked in some massive debate, ask yourself, are you watching a broken system, or are you just watching the defense play exactly by the rules? Thanks for joining this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll see you next time.